So I'm thrilled to be here with Reid. He and I have had many fascinating private conversations, and we thought it would be great to have it in public. And you all know, of course, about Reid's incredible success and founding LinkedIn and his amazing investments through both his own angel fund and then Greylock Partners. But I want to also start with a sort of different, less known side of Reid. And this is that he wanted to be a philosopher. When he started life, he thought he would be an academic, he would be a philosopher. And then he realized that this didn't have enough scale. He wanted more scale, but he wanted to keep philosophizing. And in one of our conversations, he actually told me that he calls himself a mystical atheist. So I would love to ask you, Reid, to define for this amazing technological, nerdy crowd, what is a mystical atheist?
And there's a way to warm up a crowd. Roughly speaking, I tend to find both the claim that our current theory of physics is the complete description of the world and a description of ethics and spirituality to be limited. I also find the claim to say a specific religious tradition, a specific book, a specific religious leader is the source of received truth. So in order to describe a kind of a spiritually positive way of thinking about ethics matter, the fact that we have meaning in life, that what we do in this world matters, and that there is more to the world than simply a description of physics, but without being ascribed to a religious tradition, I then call myself a mystical atheist. So that's the reason why it's a term, is to have both the question of science and science matters and all the rest, and also not ascribing any particular religious tradition, but to also believe in spirituality.
So ever since you told me that, everything you do made more sense to me. And I now have a unified field theory about Reid Hoffman based on that statement. For example, your latest book that I reviewed and absolutely love and gave to a lot of my friends for Christmas, called The Alliance, is really recognizing the growing importance of collaboration and also of loyalty in business. And I'd love you to tell us what you see as the center of creating, in the networked age, a business that's not going to have employees that stay there necessarily for life, but nevertheless can still have that loyalty that is essential for a thriving business.
So the key thing for a business being succeeding is to invest in the long term. And yet, one of the things that is essentially a lie of omission that both employers and employees are telling each other these days is that the employee is likely to work at that company for their life. It may be a little bit more true here in Germany than it is in the US, but all essentially first world markets and countries are actually heading in this direction, even Japan. And so the question is, how do you create that long-term alliance? And the answer is, you create a compact, we call it a tour of duty, by which the employee says, look, I will sign up for this finite time, say it's somewhere between 2 and 5 years, to have a transformative impact on the company. And the company signs up to having a transformative impact on my career. Essentially trading lifetime employment for lifetime employability and mutual investment.
In fact, my favorite passage, my favorite quote from the book, I want to read it to you, is, a business without loyalty is a business without long-term thinking. A business without long-term thinking is a business that's unable to invest in the future. And a business that isn't investing in tomorrow's opportunities and technologies, well, that's a company already in the process of dying. So it's a very strong statement and a very powerful sort of indictment on how many businesses are being run. And two other things that you mentioned, Alliance, are the importance of tours of duty, meaning, somebody may start in a company in a certain job, but they don't need to end there. They can go through many different tours of duty. And the other is the boomerang effect.
So part of the boomerang effect is to think about what it is we live and work in a networked age. Part of it is Now, with people serving only a certain number of years at a company, you have a large alumni basis, which has a potential mutual loyalty association with the company. That can enable rehires, that can enable leads to the company, business intelligence. We call this network intelligence within the book. And so that allows a reconnectivity to the company and a lifetime ongoing relationship, even when you're no longer an employee. But it's a relationship that both sides have to invest in, both the employee and the company. Because too often what companies say is, well, you should be happy that you worked here, so you should continue to do good things for us, even though we don't do good things for you after you've left. And so it has to be a bi-directional relationship.
In fact, it's something which I've put into practice at the Huffington Post. You know, we are only 10 years old, we'll be 10 years old in May, but already we have at least a dozen people who left the Huffington Post and then came back, and we always welcome them with open arms. In fact, our editor, who is here, Nicola Sablov, who runs our international expansion, started with us, left us to go to Forbes, and then came back. And we kept promoting him. And we love that. And it's part of the other thing that you mentioned in the book, which is creating alumni associations, either formal or informal. Of course, you come from a very famous alum group, the PayPal Mafia. That's worked out very well, hasn't it?
It has indeed. And it's not actually as formalized. Part of why we think that doing deliberate things with your alumni is good as a corporation is because it creates a much more scale effect. It creates a network around your company, right? Because you think about how networks are platforms and how it leverages business. The PayPal Mafia has been a much more informal way of doing that. I actually tend to like to call it the PayPal network because Mafia always, while it sounds more colorful, always implies that we have offers that you can't refuse, that sort of thing.
And you don't?
No.
Well, I'm part of the Greek Mafia, so it's all okay provided we help each other. You've recently become particularly interested in artificial intelligence, both the benefits and the possible dangers. Elon Musk recently just gave a $10 million donation to try and save us from the evils of artificial intelligence. I'd love to know what you think about my idea, which is that really the ultimate solution to the evils of artificial intelligence is cultivating our own inner wisdom and intelligence. I think we're missing that part in our conversations. We're constantly seeing the dangers and the opportunities outside ourselves. But in fact, we have incredible inner wisdom in us that we don't always tap into. So, as Elon and Larry Page and many others are fascinated with the outer space journey and how do we inhabit Mars and Venus, I'm personally much more fascinated with the inner space journey because I'm convinced that a lot of the problems that otherwise we're going to be facing from technology are going to be much more difficult to overcome without a deeper connection with who we truly are, which takes us back to mystical atheism.
So I think wisdom and intelligence aren't the same thing. Wisdom, to some degree, is how you apply intelligence. I think wisdom is an extreme goal in terms of how human aspiration, how we develop ourselves, and I think it's a good thing to focus on. I think that Elon, the flare he is raising about artificial intelligence is essentially, if it hits a curve by which it starts self-improving exponentially in software, we don't know what happens. And you could say, well, it could just, for example, become a search for a lot of prime numbers, or it could become something hostile to humanity. Who knows what the percentages are, but you have to worry about what the negative outcomes are. And so he's convinced me, along with some others, to think about it seriously and to think about whether or not there is a risk there. Now, to some degree, one of the things, so my undergraduate major at Stanford is a major called symbolic systems, which is artificial intelligence and cognitive science. And one of the things I've seen happen in every decade is they say, oh, look, machines have solved this new problem. Next decade, it will be artificial intelligence. Now, eventually, that will be true, right? And it may very well be true the next decade from now, too. It's not out of the question. But I do think that there's still a number of things that we have to learn. You could call them wisdom. You could call it contextual reasoning, like how do you set up the framework? You could call it an ability to make subconscious connections, or kind of a mental framework, a Weltanschauung in terms of the way that a German word. And it might very well be wisdom. But so it's something I think we should attend to, but I don't know yet if we should panic. Now, Elon thinks that it's near and present and urgent, and that more people should pay attention to it.
Well, the more disconnected we are from our wisdom, the more we should panic. Yeah. And what I find fascinating now is that because of what you've described as the networked age, because of the over-dependence on technology, we are all having a harder time being alone with ourselves. And if we're having a harder time being alone with ourselves, we'll have a harder time developing our wisdom or even discovering it. And there was a fascinating study that just came out from Harvard and the University of Virginia, where they put individuals, men and women, alone in a room, without TV, without books, without smartphones, absolutely alone, each one of them alone in a room. And they told them, you can either be alone for 15 minutes or you can get electric shock. And 67% of men opted for electric shock. I'm very happy to...
This might be an IQ test. But
I'm very happy to say to the women in the room that only 25% of women opted for electric shock, which means that women may be the wiser sex. But it is actually absolutely amazing to see, how reluctant we've become to just be alone, to have silence. I mean, now even if you go to have a massage, they put music on, and all of a sudden I turn this thing off. I don't want music all the time. So what do we do about that? You wise Reid?
Well, I don't know if I'm wise, but I I do think that one of the things that's really important is to think that the meaning of life has a spiritual component, wisdom, friendship, kind of what is the nature of experience and how do we connect to each other in a real, present, and vibrant way. And people frequently worry that online kind of disconnects you more, because even though you're quote unquote connected online, you spend more time looking at your devices, less time interacting with people. I think perhaps I'm an optimist, because I actually think that where the online ultimately heads to is facilitating more in-person connection. Mm-hmm. I think that's actually where it will gravitate to. And so generally speaking, I'm not that worried that it's bowling alone, which is quoting a book and so forth, although I think we have to be attentive to that.
You've talked about the incredibly dynamic environment in which modern media are operating. And I see a connection between a lot of your involvement with Kiva, with Donors Choose, with a lot of the amazing work being done online to actually tap into the better angels of our nature and do good. And what media is not doing. I have a perpetual peeve that those of us in the media have done a terrible job at putting the spotlight on the good things happening in the world. And we are trying to correct that at the Huffington Post by every year developing more and more resources, more and more journalists into telling the good stories and treating it as seriously as we are treating covering the crisis and the beheadings and the terrorism. Because otherwise we are not giving our readers and our viewers a full view of reality. We are giving them a very jaundiced view. And I'd love your thoughts on Contagion. We always talk about copycat crimes. In the States, we've had school shootings, and one school shooting is followed by another school shooting. So in the same way that, in a way, the media perpetuate a negative contagion, couldn't we see a situation where both the media and organizations like Kiva and Donors Choose, that you are very involved in, and Change.org, that we're both involved in, can perpetuate a positive contagion?
So I think people, page views, watching television, audiences, all tend to respond to things that are emotionally powerful to them, and it's easier to do negative things that are emotionally powerful. And so I think that what it beholds us as an audience and also as media producers to do is say, how do we put the energy into positive stories? how do we make it so that the positive stories have as much emotional connectivity as the negative ones? Because it's easier to do the negative ones, but it's important because, you know, in fact, actually if you actually look back at last year, a lot of good things happened as well, right? There was good news in the economy, there's good news across a number of different fronts, and yet that isn't what, if we ultimately get more of a pessimist outlook because all we do is see the negative, that will ultimately be destructive for all of us. So I agree with your call. I just think it takes more work in figuring out, like, for example, how do you have the human touch, or the human aspect of the story where that will spread in a positive contagion versus a negative?
Right, and you're right, it is harder to do. It requires more talent in a way. And in fact, we have here all our editors-in-chief from all our Huffington Post editions, because after this conversation, we are going in for our own conference. And this is the top of our agenda, is how do we make this work? How do we actually prioritize putting the spotlight on good things and do it in a way which is journalistically very robust, not kind of like the back of the book, soft stories. And to your point about page views and unique visitors, I want to mention to all the producers of media in the room that actually these are the stories that go most viral. That in fact we have discovered that you are more likely to want to share with your friends a story about compassion and ingenuity that taps into our better angels than a story about terrorism or a beheading. So even in terms of pure media publishing advantage, this is something for us to remember. And I know we've run out of time, but I want to ask you one final question about the fact that LinkedIn has now become a content publisher. And you've started this great series of influencers.
Of which you're one.
I'm one. And I've also discovered that, as we've always said at the Huffington Post, when you write something, don't just post it on your site. So everything I write for the Huffington Post, I also cross-post on LinkedIn. And this is something which a lot of people still do not understand, because we are sort of stuck in the idea of exclusivity, which is not at all part of the networked age. So in the same way that I post everything I write on the Huffington Post on LinkedIn, can I ask you to post everything you write on LinkedIn on the Huffington Post?
Absolutely.
Great, we have a deal. Thank you.
That's an easy question.
I have a lot of witnesses now.
Yes.
So,
and video cameras, I think.
video cameras, so we're fine, right, Nikos? Remember, we have our Greek editors here. We'll translate it into Greek, too. So I'm just delighted to be talking to you, both in public and in private. Thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for all you've done.